Welcome to Murder by Nature, where we discuss true crime, mystery disappearances, and unsolved cases. I'm Jazmin Hernandez, your host today. I want to thank you guys all for coming back over and over and over every single week and listening to these stories that not a lot of people share or tell. I will say the story that we're going to do today is a little bit more famous. But before we jump into this case, I want to go over a few points, and I want to stress these points very heavily. I've always been very hesitant to talk about this case, even before I started doing my podcast, to research it or to dive into the facts of the case. I've been a true crime fan since I can remember, and it started with the Laci Peterson case. This case and that one are very similar in a way, so they've always been super hard for me to discuss. But before dive into this case, I want to stress the fact that this is about the Watts family murder, and Shanann Watts' Facebook is still up and running. When you go to Facebook and you type in Shanann Watts, her Facebook does come up. But the thing I want to stress the most is there's people that go on there and they like and they comment and they share all of her information and all of her stuff. But with Facebook, the one thing is it pops back up into that feed. If I go in and like a post from 2016, guess what? That's going to come in and pop up in her friend's feed again. Her family and her siblings are on her Facebook. So please remember to be gentle. They don't want to see her and the murderer again. So if you decide to go check out her Facebook, please don't like, don't share, don't comment, don't do anything. Let's let the family process this and go through that. With that, we're going to get started on the Watts family murder. Before we dive in, we're going to go into the references that make this episode possible. Redditt, Wikipedia, NBCnews.com, CBSnews.com, Murder with My Husband podcast, episode 31, American Murder, The Family Next Door, Netflix documentary, biography.com/news/Chris Watts, and the Rolling Stones. Shanann Rzucek was born January 10th, 1984 in New Jersey to Frank and Sandra Rzucek. Shanann was an older sister to her brother Frankie, and her family was extremely close. Shanann was trying to make a name for herself in this world. Her family didn't come from money, and she knew that she would have to fight tooth and nail to give herself that life that she dreamed of. She purchased land in Colorado and built her own home by herself until she met Leonard King. The two were married and attempted to build a life with each other, but from Shanann's side, she wasn't happy. Her confidence dropped and she was left in a mess. She goes on and says Shanann documented her life for everything on social media, and she covered these hard stories and these hard parts in her life. And in this, she said that when she looked into the mirror, she didn't recognize the person she was. Shanann and Leonard divorced in 2009. In 2010, Shanann was on Facebook and she got a friend request from Christopher Watts. She recalls, "What the heck? I'm never going to meet him. I have a ton of Facebook friends. What's one more?" Chris continued to pursue Shanann to the point where she eventually ended up giving in. She didn't want to date, but he just kept pushing and pushing to be that person for her. Chris and Shanann were married in North Carolina, Charlotte, on November 3rd, 2012. And by the following year, the couple was expecting their first child, Bella Watts. This was something that Shanann dreamed of for years. When she was younger, she was diagnosed with lupus and struggled hard with her illness. She stated that when she met Chris, she was at her lowest of lows, and he stuck by her, accepting her for who she was. She never would have imagined in 3 short years they would be married and they would be welcoming their daughter into the world. 2 short years later, the couple then welcomes their second daughter, Celeste, known as Cece, on July 17, 2015. Quickly, the family started to feel the struggles of raising children and trying to stay afloat. In June of 2015, the Watts family filed for bankruptcy. With a combined income of $90,000 for the entire year in 2014, The family could simply not afford their lifestyle. In addition to credit card debt, student loans, and medical bills, the couple stated that their monthly income and their mortgage took up all the money that they had. In 2018, Shanann decided that she had come too far to let this be their life and started a new job at Lavelle. This is a multi-million, it's an MLM, but it's for health supplies, and it came with a greater income and paid trips. Shanann started to sell Thrive, and she used her social media as a way to kind of get her out there. She felt like if people could relate to her and her family, that they would want to buy these products. So, like I said, she documented every single part of their life. As the family feels like they can breathe again, Shanann surprises Chris with the news they're expecting. In a video from Shanann's Facebook, she's wearing a t-shirt that says, "Oops, we did it again," and surprises Chris with the news of their pregnancy. She's recording it and getting that kind of first look. Chris reacts by saying, "That's awesome," and gives her a kiss. On June 17th, 2018, Shanann posted about Chris on Facebook. It was Father's Day. She writes, "Chris, we're so incredibly blessed to have you. You do so much for us every day and take great care of us. You're the reason I was brave enough to agree to number 3. From laundry to kids, to showers, to everything. You're incredible, and we are so lucky to have you in our life. Happy Father's Day." As the family is balancing Chris's job as an operator for the local petroleum company and Shanann's frequent business trips for the nutrition supply company, their lives are centered around their daughter, as shown in Shanann's frequent Facebook post. She would post multiple times throughout the day and document everything from the outside. They appear to be a happy, stubborn family, but Shanann's friends started to hear that there was some trouble in their paradise. See, Shanann grew a community of hundreds of girls because it was an MLM. They worked on top and underneath each other. So as Shanann's trying to get people to come in and work underneath her or help build up the people that are working underneath her, she has to become friends, and they become very close. She actually meets one of her best friends, Nicole Atkinson, and she will come into play later in the story. Chris began drastically distancing himself from Shanann shortly after she told him about the pregnancy. A baffled Shanann told friends repeatedly that he's never behaved like this before. And partly as a cooling off period, she decided to take the girls to visit their grandparents in North Carolina over the summer of 2018. Throughout the 5-week visit, she noted that Chris rarely called to check in and wondered if his silence was due to a fight with his parents. While Shanann was visiting family in North Carolina, she decided that she would go visit her in-laws. She didn't get along great with Chris's family, and they didn't like her very much either. During the short visit, it was said that Chris's mom, Sydney, had ice cream in her freezer containing all the things that Cece, the youngest one, was allergic to. And witnesses said that Shanann got upset and started arguing with Chris's mom. Sydney demanded that she left, and after she did, she texted Chris to call his dad and explain how upset Chris is that they would do this to his daughter. Chris quickly replies back to her and says that he completely agrees and he can't believe that they did this. See, Shanann and Chris weren't talking very often, but with something like this, he was trying to respond back quickly. And Shanann told him that she never wants the kids to see his family again. She never wants to go back there. There's a lot of turmoil within that relationship that kind of comes out with text messages that she ends up sending over to friends. During the trip, Shanann doesn't understand why Chris is being so distant and sends him the following message. "You okay? It's like you don't want to talk. I keep trying to talk and had to dig it out of you." Chris says, "I'm fine, baby. The last few days at work had put a lot of responsibility on me with having to be there for new people. I didn't mean to seem short, boo. I love you to the moon and back." Shanann responds back to him saying that she misses him and she felt like he just wanted to work out and run, which he does state he's doing it to clear his head, but she didn't buy his excuse. She messaged him saying, "I wish my husband wanted to talk to me." Shanann makes one final attempt to help her marriage and sends the following message. I realized during this trip what's missing in our relationship. It's only one-way emotions and feelings. I can't come back like this. I need you to meet me halfway. You don't consider others, nor do you think about their feelings. Chris agrees with her and says that he'll work on it, and she won't come back like that. On July 31st, 2018, Chris flies to North Carolina to visit their family on the final week of vacation. Despite being on family vacation, Shanann texts a friend that says that they're having trouble between the couple. She tells her friend that Chris hasn't touched her or even kissed her while he's been there. She tells his friend that he's never been like this, and she's been silently crying the whole time. Even though there's a huge amount of trouble in paradise, Shanann still posts to social media as the perfect family. This is something that was kind of hard to read. During these text messages, she's letting her friend know when he came to the airport that he kissed her, but he didn't touch her butt or squeeze her or hug her. It's like he didn't want to touch her or be too close to her. And this is a pattern that he kind of takes on from here on out. During their vacation, Shanann tries to have sex with her husband, who ultimately refuses. Shanann texts her friend that she thinks Chris is having an affair, and they reply that they don't think that's true. They don't think he has it in him. She tells them that he's never been like this except for one time when his parents didn't attend their wedding. She tells her friend, he's changed, and I don't know who he is. He hasn't touched me all week, kissed me, talked to me, except for when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. Addie, I don't know what to do. The family vacation ends and the couple flies home to Colorado. We're going to get down to some of the fun parts right now. So we do have a sponsor for this episode, and I want to dive right into it. It's something super special that I think that you guys are going to love and want to have in your home too. My Post Glow wants to recognize and celebrate your big milestones. The team at My Post Glow will gather all the facts and photos from your event to write a custom story and layout to bring your memories to life. You know those memories that you're constantly playing back and forth in your head that become your happy place, the feelings that you get from that? Well, with a few simple steps, My Post Glow will transfer those memories into a beautiful masterpiece for you to cherish every single day. You'll have 3 options to select from: Mega Glow, Grande Glow, and Basic Glow. This is the perfect option for you to celebrate the birth of a child, a marriage, and even a new pet. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to use their FAQ videos on the website and YouTube. You might even catch a celebrity's voice that you know talking you through these answers. Visit mypostglow.com and let them write your story. On August 8th, 2018, Shanann texts a friend. He told me he doesn't want this baby, and he's happy with just Bella and Cece. He thought he wanted another one. I'm so sick to my stomach. I tried to have sex with him last night just to see if that would help, and he rejected me. Shanann also texts the same friend. I don't feel safe with him after what he said about the baby. On August 9th, 2018, Shanann tells a friend that Chris went with her to her ultrasound, but was cold. So she decided that she was going to cancel the gender reveal. She said during the ultrasound, he wasn't really paying attention, and when she tried to hold his hand, he pushed away. She says that Nicole Atkinson is going to tell her the gender and let her know so she has something happy. She's hoping that it's a boy because she thinks that will turn Chris around. They've always wanted a boy. She couldn't believe the man that he was becoming, though. She had been crying so much that her eyes burned. Later that evening, she texts another concerned friend. Oh my God, much better. We talked. He told me he loved me back. Still cold, but not as cold. He even kissed me before going to sleep in the basement. But her excitement was short-lived. That weekend, Shanann was going on a business trip in Arizona, and she was going to leave the girls with Chris. Her friend Nicole Atkinson was going to pick her up, and they were going to head to Arizona together. She was going to drive to the airport and fly on the same flight. Shanann felt so much relief from her conversation with Chris that she wrote him a handwritten note and headed out. In the note, she tells Chris how much she loves him, how much she wants to fight for their marriage, and how she just wants things to go back to how they were. And she thought everything was fine. On Saturday, August 11th, 2018, the Saturday that Shanann is in Arizona, Chris arranged for a babysitter so that he can attend a sports game and then go out to dinner with friends. Shanann knew about this dinner and she knew about the game, but she also knew the times of everything too. Shanann knew that Chris was out and decided that she was going to check the bank account when she saw that something didn't make sense. Chris went to dinner at the Lazy Dog Cafe, but his bill was for $60. And if anyone doesn't know what the Lazy Dog Cafe is, it's kind of like a Chili's. So a bill of $60 for one beer and a burger was really high to Shanann. Shanann and her friend Nicole looked at the menu and knew Chris was lying. Now we're going to back up just a little bit, and this may get a little confusing, but we're going to back up to June. I want to dive into that since there's 2 parts to this whole series, and I want to make sure that everyone has all the information. In June of 2018, Chris Watts started talking with Nicole Kessinger. Nicole was a coworker of Chris's. Chris came by her office one day and struck up a conversation. The two hung out for the first time outside the office a month later. According to the Denver Post, Chris and Nicole seen each other about 4 to 5 times a week, and they started a physical relationship in early July. He tells her that he's almost divorced from his wife, but they're separated at the moment. Later that month, while Shanann and the girls were out of town in North Carolina, they're from Colorado, he tells Nicole the divorce is finalized. Insider reports say that Nicole goes to Chris's home for the first time July 4th. It is also reported on July 4th that Chris stayed the night at Nicole's house and woke up to several text calls and FaceTimes from Shanann. He tells Nicole he has to go home because his wife will call again and he has to be home when she calls. This makes Nicole furious and proves to her that she is the other woman and that she doesn't want to be the other woman. So she tells Chris to leave. But this is short-lived. Nicole ends up meeting back up with Chris that same exact night, and they stay the night again. They also go on a date to the Shelby American Car Collection Museum on July 4th and spend the night at the Great Sand Dunes National Park on July 28th, all while his family is away. On July 30th, he gives her a beautiful love note before joining his family on vacation. So with this, Nicole Atkinson is Shanann's friend. That's not the same Nicole. I just want to make sure. There's 2 Nicoles in this story. Nicole K is the bad Nicole. Nicole Atkinson is a rock star. Now back to the night at Lazy Dog. And the receipt showed that instead of him going out with his friends, that he took Nicole out to dinner and he paid with his credit card. He didn't use a gift card like he did all the other times. But the charge did not escape Shanann's notice. Friends stated that Shanann was devastated. She knew Chris was lying. She just didn't know how to point it out, and she wanted to get home. Still, no one could have ever guessed the chilling, brutal murders that was about to end their happily ever after. In the wee hours of the morning of August 13th, 2018, around 2 a.m., Shanann returns home after her friend Nicole Atkinson dropped her off. Nicole and Shanann were supposed to get home around 11, but their flight got delayed, so she didn't get in until 2. Nicole watched as Shanann entered the house and then drove off. On August 13, 2018, around 1:40 p.m., Nicole Atkinson becomes worried when she doesn't hear from Shanann. I texted her several times, she says. I knew she had a doctor's appointment that morning because she's pregnant and she wasn't feeling good. I was even more concerned when she didn't show up for that. Nicole calls police to do a welfare check on Shanann and the kids. She tells the police that Shanann was not feeling very well during their trip and she's scared that Shanann might be hurt. Nicole and her son, Nicholas Atkinson, went to the Watts residence and observed Shannon's car in the garage. The vehicle still had the child seats in it. Nicole called Shanann's husband, Christopher Watts, and requested he come home and check on Shanann. Nicole stated Shanann was diabetic, but wasn't known to ever have seizures or to even black out, so this was weird. When police arrived, they checked the front door, and Nicole entered the password and opened it. The door had a safety latch on it, which prevented people from opening it more than a few inches. This was a little worrisome to the police because it showed that the only way out was either through the back door or the garage. They announced that they were the police department and heard no noises from Shanann or her children, Celeste Watts and Bella Marie Watts. They didn't know or see anything through the windows that was out of the ordinary, though. Everything was immaculate, which, was a little weird. They checked all the windows, all the rear doors, and they were locked. The sliding glass door had a lock bar on it still. This proved that there was only one way out of the house. Nicole kept saying Christopher was not coming. She called him several times, and he kept giving her different arrival times, and she needed the officer to call him to make it serious. The officer called Chris by phone and asked for the garage door code. Chris stated that it didn't work from the outside and that he was about 5 minutes away at that time. When Chris arrived, he opened the garage door and went inside the garage to check for Shanann and the 2 children. Chris gave consent to check the entire house. The officer, Chris, Nicole, all went through the house looking for the girls. And this is something I want to point out is he went through the garage and went into the house for about a minute. And Nicole is on the phone with Shanann's mom. And she's trying to figure out what's going on. Chris then comes back a whole minute and a half later, unlocks the door and walks away. Nicole and her son look at the police officer saying, "Can we go in?" And the police officer says, "I can't, but you can. Chris has to give me permission." So Nicole walks in, and after a minute or so, the officer asks Chris, "Can I come inside?" And Chris says, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Well, on the landing, Nicole, the officer, and Chris are checking the rooms for any signs of the girls. During this time, Chris approaches the officer holding Shanann's wedding ring and says he found it on the nightstand. Another thing I want to point out here is when he comes out, he's holding the wedding ring kind of like a gun. He has his hand in a pointer with a gun, and the ring is just sitting at the tip. He didn't want to touch it. But I just thought it was weird that it was in a gun shape and not just in his hand or on his finger, or he's touching it or messing with it. And the officers felt that this was very weird as well when they did the behavior analysis on Chris. When Nicole asked where Shanann's phone was, Chris walked over to the couch upstairs and found it between the cushions. He knew exactly where it was. The phone was off though, and he made a comment that when it comes on, it'll be blowing up with messages. To which Nicole's son, Nicholas, laughed and was like, "That's the truth." Chris did not know the password to Shanann's phone, though, but Nicole knew it, and she turned it on. Chris gave consent to the officers to look at her phone to see if there was any leads on where Shanann or the girls might be. But no calls were made that morning. Chris stated that Shanann arrived home from her trip around 2 a.m. and was asleep at the time. He woke up around 5 a.m. to get ready for work, and then they began talking about separation. Chris stated it was a civil conversation and they were not arguing. There were emotions, though. Christopher stated that they began talking about the separation for a few weeks and that he left to start his work at around 5:28. It said that he backed the truck up into the garage to load tools up and left. Chris stated that he had tools stolen in the past, so now he unloads his truck on Fridays to kind of not have that happen. Chris told the police that Shanann was in bed at the time, but told him that she was going to be going to a friend's house that day with her 2 kids. He stated that she didn't tell him what friend's house she would be going to, and he told the police that he went to a job site at an oil well past Hudson, Colorado, to check on it. He needed to look at it. He was there alone for a few hours and was an operator for the local petroleum company. When the police were questioning Chris, Shanann's mother called and adamantly said that Chris did something and that they needed to check the GPS on his truck. Chris's work truck had a GPS on it, and she felt like something wasn't right. This didn't make sense. Police also noted that as they were searching the house, the master bedroom had the comforter, the sheets, and the pillows all removed. But the fitted sheet was next to the comforter on the floor, and the pillows were on the side of the bed. But the one thing that stood out is the top sheet was gone. It was nowhere in the room. This was odd to them as the house was weirdly clean. This is something that news people talk about. This is something that TV shows hosts talk about. In this case, their house for having 2 children was immaculate. It did not seem right. Nicole told the police that Shanann works from home, and it was extremely unusual for her to leave her house without her phone, that she does direct sales and doesn't go anywhere without it. On the body cam footage, you can see that Nicole is visibly upset. She keeps saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." And when they found her phone, she almost broke down. Nicole's on the phone with Shanann's mom this entire time walking through the house. And it's gut-wrenching to see. But she's physically ill while Chris is just nonchalant the entire time. He doesn't have really any emotion. He's not crying. He's not going through each room, running downstairs. He's just kind of standing there like, oh, whatever. The police don't find this, like, at first to be very weird because they were talking about separation. He thinks that she just left to a friend's house from what he's saying, and it's not that big of a deal. Nathaniel, the neighbor to the east, tells Nicole and police that he has a home surveillance footage. Like, he has a home surveillance camera that points right to his driveway, but you can also see the Watts driveway. At 5:30 a.m., you can see Chris's truck backing into the driveway, and then it leaves a short time later. Nathaniel and Nicole both state that they've never seen him back into the driveway before. Unfortunately, the video shows no other vehicles coming or going. The garage door of the residence was checked. It did not open from the outside, but it did open and close from within. While reviewing the footage, you can tell that Chris is extremely uncomfortable and has a panic attack. He puts his hands above his head to slow down his heart. I want to point that during this time, the guy, like in the footage, he has it all on a big screen TV. And Chris is just standing in a corner. At some points, he's not even looking at the TV. He's like looking out the door because the door is pointed to where Chris is looking. He's fidgeting on his phone, texting the entire time. You can see it on this body cam footage. And the officer's like looking at it, and Chris does not want to be there. He's super uncomfortable, and he just kind of keeps swaying back and forth. This makes it seem weird to his neighbor. His neighbor tells police that Chris is usually a very low-key guy, super submissive. He doesn't talk very much, super sweet, but he's just not like one to babble, and he's babbling. The officer tells Nathaniel, well, what would you do in this situation? Because again, they still don't believe that Chris did anything. At one point during the surveillance footage, they're watching it, and I think the footage like cuts because it goes to, it looks like a commercial or something, and it's of a baby in the womb. Like you can see the umbilical cord, it's an ultrasound or something, and I don't know if it's a commercial or what it is, but Chris is looking at the screen. He pauses, looks over at the officer and says, she's also 15 weeks pregnant. So I know some people report like, oh my God, he told them that she was pregnant after looking at it just randomly. To me, I was like, oh, why would he do that? Until I actually watched the footage, and it was a commercial that came on, and he was looking at the screen, and it showed that there was a baby on screen. It was in like utero. So I don't feel like it's that weird that he said it in that moment, because there was something that brought him to that. When police checked Shanann's phone, it had an alert that stated the garage door was opened at 12:42 p.m. Chris showed the police his phone, which also showed the alarms of the doors when they were open. And it showed an alarm about the time when he had left the garage door open, so that morning. The police noticed that Chris's demeanor was very nonchalant. He once asked if he should go look for his family, and the police had to remind him that her car was at the residence and they needed him kind of here. He did not ask again about looking, or did he seem very overly concerned. Nicole and Nathaniel said that they both felt like Chris was extremely nervous. Nathaniel told police that he had heard Chris yelling loudly at Shanann recently more and more. And the police were kind of like at a standstill. There wasn't much that they can do besides looking at her friends, going through different things. She couldn't have gone anywhere with anyone because Chris's truck was the only one that was seen coming and going from their house. Police canvassed the neighborhood, but no one contacted or observed any vehicle coming and going or anything unusual. They left business cards with a few residents that had like the video surveillance. They either had cameras or Ring doorbells, stuff like that. And they requested copies of that. I want to point out that at this time, police do not think that Chris is involved in this murder. They don't even know if it's a murder. They think that she could have just been gone due to the conversation that Chris was having with her. They thought maybe she just up and left. They didn't realize that her family wasn't in the area. And when he told them that they were clear across the country, that did spark up a little like, where might she go? And her best friend was at the house. I also want to point out that Shanann's mother told officers and Nicole before Chris got back that Chris told them that Shanann went to a friend's house. He didn't know what friend, but Nicole thought that this was weird because Nicole was her best friend. So where would she have gone and not be texting Nicole back? On August 14th, 2018, Chris talks with a news reporter and pleads for the girls' return. He says, "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like, if someone has her, just bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring them back." So a day later, he's talking to reporters. He's making newscasts. And police also brought in canine dogs at this time. They wanted to see if they can track their scent anywhere or find them, kind of anything. There was a ton of news reporters there, and police were canvassing and passing out flyers all the next day. This made huge headlines because there was a pregnant lady with her 2 children. So I'm going to stop right there. That's going to be the end of part 1. We will dive into all of the rest next week, but we need to take this in chunks. It gets pretty serious, and I want to make sure that we have that space for that. That brings us to the end of this episode, part 1, the Watts family murder. As always, thank you for listening to Murder by Nature. If you enjoyed our show, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any streaming platform that you're currently on. And be sure to come back on Saturday for part 2 of the family Watts murder. Until then, I am your host, Jazmin Hernandez. Don't forget to stay safe and don't murder or get murdered, you lovely humans.